I'm Ben Schwartz. This is Emphasis Massachusetts, and thanks for watching. I'm here today with Deborah Shah. She's the Executive Director of Progressive Massachusetts, which is an exciting new organization that champions progressive causes and candidates around Massachusetts. And we're here to talk about the organization, the upcoming special election in Massachusetts, and the broader political scene.
Right.
And thank you, Deborah, for coming to talk to us today.
Well, thank you, Ben, for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's a delight. And by the way, Deborah came out from Boston. It is snowing. And so she gets extra credit for roughing out the windy roads.
You're
So
right.
thank you again.
You're welcome.
Would you tell us a little bit about the organization Progressive Massachusetts? It is relatively new.
That's right.
A response to the needs for a progressive voice
Right.
in Massachusetts. So talk a little bit about what you do and what your progress has been thus far.
Okay. Well, we're actually brand new in terms of being incorporated. We were incorporated as a 501c4 in January of this year, but the idea for this organization has been percolating for many, many, many years. People coming off of the Deval Patrick campaign in 2006 really felt that they wanted to continue the work of the campaign, and they wanted to support the governor. But it was, and in fact, the governor made some efforts along those lines.
And you worked on that campaign,
I did
correct?
work on that campaign. I was one of his regional field directors. It really didn't work as an outshoot of the government. It's very, very hard, and I think the president found the same thing with OFA in 2008. Everybody was very excited. They wanted to support the president, particularly with his big ideas and big initiatives like healthcare. But it's very, very hard to be negotiating with the legislature, and at the same time you're rabble-rousing outside the building or outside of the Beltway through a progressive organization.
Sure.
So those efforts really didn't get off the ground in a meaningful way. And so every time there's one of these elections, and I think when the governor was reelected, we felt it again, that people have this desire to continue the work. And they have a desire to be together because it is community, and we have less and less community nowadays, fewer and fewer opportunities to be together, to work on things together, and campaigns are one of those things, and so people want to continue, and this was something that people wanted to do.
Yeah.
At the same time, Massachusetts is known as this incredibly liberal state around the country. And one of the good things about Massachusetts is we've been a leader in progressive ideas, really from the beginning of the founding of the country. We were the first to have a public park, Boston Common, first to have a public transportation system, the subway, the T rather. And see, you can tell I'm from New York when I talk about subways.
I grew up in Brooklyn, I get you.
But when we were first marriage equality, we were first to have universal health care. And so we have a way of setting the pace for the country. But in many ways, we're not as liberal or progressive as we purport to be.
Sure.
There's a lot of things we can do inside Massachusetts to be better.
We will discuss that in a moment, but you brought up an interesting point. Even if unintentionally, you said liberal or progressive.
Right.
Now, over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, the word liberal has become something of an intended insult.
Right.
The right will say, "Oh, he's a liberal, she's a liberal," as if that's akin to being a leper.
Saab driving, latte drinking, lefty liberal.
Yes, which is, Volvo, lattes, whatever it may be. Whole Foods shopping.
Right.
Yes. But the point is that is an appellation that people have shied away from because essentially it has become an accusation.
Right.
And there seems to be an adoption thereby of the label progressive.
Right.
Now, is there a difference, and if so, what? And regardless of whether there's a difference or not, please define for us your understanding of the term progressive and progressivism.
Well, there's some people who are progressives or liberals who do make a distinction.
Yep.
So I don't want to speak for everyone in the movement. I don't make a distinction. And for me and for our organization, what it is is concern for fairness and opportunity in this country. And I think that the policies that support fairness and opportunity, we're not saying that in the end that the outcome for everyone will be equal, that we'll all have an equal amount of property, an equal amount of money, an equal amount of happiness, and so forth. But we do believe that people should have an opportunity for an equal opportunity for all the great things that the country has to offer. And that's just not possible given some of the constraints in our system. So progressives believe in a form of economic, social, and ultimately, if it applies, criminal justice and environmental justice that leads us to want to see education that's quality education for everyone. Healthcare, quality healthcare at a cost that people can afford, available for everyone. Government available for everyone. People shouldn't be denied the right to vote if they are legally able to. People shouldn't have more influence on campaigns than other people. You know, we do still have a one person, one vote, but we know that the money in the system is tipping the scale.
Sure, understood. Question though. I think that if you were to speak with an intellectually honest right-winger, he or she might tell you, I believe in those things too. I believe in fairness. I believe in equal opportunity. Whether that's true or not is an entirely different matter, but that's certainly what they would say, and I have no reason to disbelieve that assertion. The mechanism, I think, is what they might differ on with you. They might view the market as the appropriate mechanism to accomplish those things. You might view government or community, whichever way you want to put it, as being the appropriate mechanism. And please contrast those different views.
Well, I think to some extent, and I have, unlike a lot of progressives, I have a lot of conservative friends that I get to talk to from time to time because I come out of a business environment. So I've kept a number of those friends. So just so I can have interesting dinner time conversations. So a couple of things. One is I'm not sure they do support the notion of fairness and equality. They certainly don't believe that people of all sexual orientations have equal rights to marry, for instance, and that's a straw, that women have equal rights when it comes to the control of their bodies. So I'm not sure that some of the social conservatives are quite in the same camp when it comes to equal rights. But let's put that aside for a moment, because that might be, you know, when we talk about, I think you were leaning in the direction of, well, what produces equality of opportunity? Is it the market? Is it government? You know, community? You know, the market has been held up nowadays in the last 20 or 30 years as something that sort of is neutral. You know, and its neutrality allows the outcomes to fall where they may. But the market is not neutral. We have companies who all the time are what we would call externalizing their costs. You know, they are making it necessary for the government to pick up the tab when they decide to move all their workers to Costa Rica or China. The government picks up the tab of all the unemployment, all the mental health issues, all, you know, all the retraining that has to take place. So the market is not quite equal.
True also of environmental externalities.
Exactly, and that's where that notion originally came from. When the community has to pay for your pollution while your shareholders are freed from that cost, and you know, benefit from the profit you're making because you don't have to clean up the river or the brown site or whatever it is, then it's not a neutral ground on which just the outcomes are what the outcomes are. We also know that inputs are important, and not everyone has had an equal opportunity at education, at the kind of you know, experiences that make you successful in the marketplace. And until that time when everyone has an equal experience of those things, the market does reward certain experiences, certain education, much more than others. And so we have to make sure that people have an equal opportunity, and the market doesn't quite do that. Now, I don't think government quite does that either. I don't think progressives are saying government needs to be the solution Government needs to take over industry. Government needs to run everything. I like your idea of a community, though, the notion that we're in it together, as the president said in the most recent inaugural speech.
Sure.
And that's what progressives believe in. We're in it together. So we all have to pitch in. We all have to help our less fortunate, disabled, less capable people. We have to pitch in and help.
Right. And that is not exclusive of economic growth and opportunity.
In fact, it creates it.
Okay.
Think of all of the people who may not have had an opportunity that you and I had. I can speak for myself. I had an amazing opportunity. I grew up in a middle-class family. We went on trips. We came to Boston the first time when I was 6 from New Jersey because my parents thought I should see.
And you came back.
And yeah, I did. I came back many times. But they thought I should see where the country was born. How many children get that opportunity, have that eye-opening experience, and might be, at this moment, capable of what I was capable of because I had that experience? I wouldn't want to miss those children having an opportunity to contribute to our society, because I know there's great genius, there's great energy, there's great innovation out there.
Now, you say on your website, you say Progressive Mass welcomes all progressives regardless of political affiliation.
Right.
Now, that is a nice sort of sweeping statement. Like, we welcome all comers.
Right.
But in reality, please describe what your association is with any organized political party. It would seem to me by what you're describing that by your very philosophy, you're a little bit... how shall I say, uninviting to certain elements of the political spectrum.
Well, we probably are. So parties are organized on a variety of bases. So people who, I remember I was watching, I guess it was Morning Joe, and they were talking about John Boehner. And one of the commentators said, you know, if John Boehner was raised in Southie, he'd be a Democrat. You know, so what makes somebody a Democrat or a Republican may be different from what makes somebody a progressive or not a progressive. So we put our values up on our website. They're right there under our issues tab. And if you agree with our values, if you agree with us on these things, or most of these things, not everybody's going to agree on everything, but we came together, we developed these values, and if you agree with these values, then I don't care what your registration card says. A lot of unenrolled voters here in Massachusetts are progressives. We have members of the Green Party, has been active in both Massachusetts politics and in our group. We have a number of Green Party members. Whether or not a registered Republican would find our values appealing, if they did, welcome aboard.
It's interesting you mentioned this, though, because so many of the issues, if you do polling, the people may believe in a specific position that you hold, but not identify with you vis-a-vis your party affiliation. Right. For example, you've got a majority of NRA members who believe in certain gun control measures, you know, universal background checks, for example. And that may not be a popular opinion in the Republican Party or on the conservative right, and that's where most of those people find their homes politically. So to the extent that the Republican Party is not representing its constituents, individual views, perhaps you do have some fellow travelers on the right.
I would think that's the case. You know, but party identification sometimes is like religion. It's something you acquire from your family and you don't give it up easily. I have a friend who is a Republican who says, well, I'm definitely pro-choice and I'm definitely in favor of equal marriage. And then he goes on to explain all the other things that progressives would agree with that but he says, but I'm still a Republican.
I see.
I said, well, okay, I don't have that much to do to convince you. We will eventually not be a Republican if the Republican Party continues.
Understood. Well, what kind of traction you have? You are a new organization.
Yes.
To explain what, I mean, I know that you have done a series of outreach meetings, and by what I've heard, they've been quite well attended, quite successful. Tell me how it's going for you.
You know, it's going well, but it's always a tough slog,
Sure.
you know, to be new. We held, I think it was 25, what we called It's Up to Us sessions around the state. We had one in Amherst, Holyoke. We were scheduled for Greenfield tonight, actually, but the snow's gotten in the way. And I was just yesterday on the Cape, so we're doing them across the state.
Putting a lot of miles on your car.
Right, I am doing that. And we usually get 25 or 30 people at a meeting, talk about how this last year went and what we want to do moving forward and what Progressive Mass is like. And so as a result, we have about 2,000 individuals who are on our emailing list, and we consider them our members at this moment. Eventually, we intend to become a dues-paying organization and to get them more actively involved than just passively receiving our emails. But people sign petitions, they call their legislators, they're beginning to put letters to the editor in papers, and as they take more and more actions, then they're building their networks, and that's how we'll build.
What are your associations with, your strategic relationships with other organizations, environmental organizations, other groups like Progressive Democrats, et cetera? Where does that stand?
Okay, well, a couple of things. One is we have a strong relationship with both Mass Alliance, which is a progressive organization of organizations, whereas we're an organization of individual members, and we have a close working relationship with Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts. In fact, we just hosted one of our sessions together in Brookline. They're part of the Democratic Party. We're not. We've chosen not to be part of the Democratic Party, not because we don't like the Democrats, but because we just don't want to be part of a party.
Sure, understood.
And so we're certainly building relationships with the community organizing groups like Neighbor to Neighbor. I have a lunch this week with senior members of their staff, and so that would be an ongoing effort to not to duplicate efforts going on, let's say in the communities of color, for instance, but to build on what's going on.
Well, I mean, obviously you've got a slew of issues and policy priorities that are important to you, and of necessity there are a lot of interested parties in each and every one of them.
Right.
So that developing those relationships is a good way both to advance that agenda and to expand your organization. Is that something that you found helpful?
Yes. And actually, one of the things that I like to emphasize when I'm talking with groups that exist already is that, for instance, a lot of progressive legislation on Beacon Hill, it already has the support of the obvious representatives and senators, people who are representing Newton and Brookline and Somerville and Cambridge and the communities of color. But they are looking for support from some of the less progressive districts. We have members in the less progressive districts.
Right.
And that's a very big selling point for a lot of our partners. We can help you pass the right kind of legislation we all believe in, because we can take responsibility for convincing some of the suburban elected officials that it's the right thing to do.
What do you concretely do? You say we can help convince, we can actually effect some of the change that we advocate. Describe how you do that.
What we do is we meet directly with representatives and senators. We take action in the community. We organize in the community to bring. We call the legislators, we talk with the legislators actively about what we believe. We ensure that there are emails coming to their offices to tell them what they think. Right now, for instance, gun control is a huge issue. As soon as Representative David Linsky filed his bill, the Gun Owners Alliance just was flooding the phones with anti-gun control messaging.
Sure.
Well, eventually we will be strong enough to rival that organization, so that a representative who might live in a district where gun ownership is quite high, as opposed to an inner city rep who is very familiar with, for instance, Mayor Menino's Mayors Against Guns, and is voting for gun control. But this suburban rep might get as many calls from us as they get from the Gun Coalition.
I see. Now, when you say you meet directly with legislators,
Our members do. We don't as an organization. We don't work the building like the advocacy groups.
Sure, understood.
Our members contact their own representatives and express their views.
Now, you make endorsements in political races. You take on causes.
Yes, we do.
And you also endorse candidates and work on their behalf. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Now,
we intend to, yes.
Yes, no, understood.
Right.
And look, you have a long history of involvement, so I know at least obliquely what that is. But your mission going forward will be to work on behalf of candidates and causes that whose values you share.
Right.
Now, where that's going to be door knocking, that'll be
door knocking, phone banking,
Right.
Whatever it takes to support those candidates, and it works both ways. We will, with individuals in Beacon Hill who have shown the courage to step out and support progressive causes, but who may be imperiled because of that, we will work to keep them in office. And if we have the opposite situation, we will work to find somebody to run against them.
Right. Now, I have to ask you what your what your views of this. Senator Kerry, is moving up.
Yes. Or out, or something. Yes.
Well,
he's getting the job that he so richly deserves.
No,
He
that's
really
right.
does.
That's right. And so that leaves a seat open.
Yes.
And so once again, Massachusetts is in a special election.
Oh, yay!
And that's going to be coming up pretty quickly.
Right.
And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on the election, on the candidates out there, on who may be standing for it,
Yes.
and
Well,
what
we
the
don't know. Well, here's a couple things. One is we're primarily focused on state issues, but we would be silly not to see that whoever is our senator, along with Elizabeth Warren, it's important for the state because money flows from the federal government. So we probably will endorse if there's a primary race, and then if there's, when the general comes around.
You would endorse in a primary.
We would endorse in a primary, absolutely. That's one of the reasons we're not part of the
Associated
Democratic
with
the
the party,
Democratic
right,
Party.
understood.
We will endorse in the primary. We'll endorse. Our members will vote on it based on the voting records of the individuals, if the individuals have a voting record, or are based on a questionnaire that an individual without a voting record
That's an
would
interesting
have
way
to-
of doing it, because
Right.
you've got a lot of advocacy organizations will have political committees, 10 or 12 people who are nominally insiders, whatever you want to say, who interview candidates and vote to endorse.
Right.
You, on the other hand, have your membership
Right.
vote to endorse based on the candidate's records. Is
That's
that-
right.
Okay.
That's right. And we would normally do a more fulsome effort if it wasn't a special, but
Understood.
it's important to act quickly. I don't really know who else is going to be in this race. Obviously, Congressman Markey has already declared. I've been reviewing his record in these last few days. I know Congressman Markey quite well, and I've always worked well with him. He's an outstanding individual. But ultimately, looking at his record, it is quite impressive from a progressive point of view. But I don't know who else is going to be in this race.
I have to ask you this, and Deb, pardon me if I'm putting you in undesirable company from your point of view, but it's a reasonable thing to say that that your counterparts on the right
Right.
are the Tea Party,
Right.
and if arguably you represent the more left-leaning wing of the left.
Right.
And they represent the more right-leaning wing of the Republican Party.
Right.
How do you feel about being in that company?
Well, to the extent that they use very good grassroots organizing techniques, I'm fine being in that company, because that's, to the extent that the political work really represents the views of the people, I'm comfortable with it. But I think we all know that the Tea Party really is funded by some very not unsavory people, that a lot of the Tea Party is a front for corporate interests, for the Koch brothers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not as clear that, and they have been very unwilling to disclose who their funders are. And,
yes, but
so to the extent that it's a faux organizing movement, I have some questions.
well, but the people who stand out holding those banners and shrieking and screaming are sincere. regardless of where their money comes from or who bought their banners.
Right.
Those people do believe in what they're saying, whether it's valid or not.
Right.
To the-
I also think that a difference between us is some of their tactics are unacceptable tactics to our people and our organization. We're not going to be calling representatives and issuing death threats. We're not going to be standing at funerals decrying the beliefs of the people who are burying their soldiers. I mean, that's just not acceptable behavior in the public square.
Do you think that they have seen their apex and are on the way out?
I certainly hope so.
Well, hoping and thinking are two different things.
I do think, eventually, the circus leaves town.
Right.
And I think people tire. I think if you're a real movement that's based in the real beliefs of the community, and you're there for the community interests, you will last. But if you're just some kind of media event that's taking place to see how loud and obnoxious you can be, then I think eventually people get interested in the next Paris Hilton or the next Lindsay Lohan.
The next train wreck.
The next train wreck.
Understood, right. But I mean, do you think that, well, look, I'm going to be very blunt with this.
Right.
Would the Tea Party exist? Would it have been cultivated and would it have taken root had President Obama not been black?
I don't think so. I think there's an enormous amount of what we've seen in the last few years, that over-the-top behavior and a lack of accepting him as our president that is driven exclusively by the fact that he's black.
Even though they might deny that?
Even though they might. It's just too obvious to those of us who grew up in the civil rights movement, as I did, as I think you did, who saw that behavior for what it was when it was happening during Martin Luther King's day.
Sure.
And I think we know what it is now.
I'm going to ask you at a more sort of fundamental level. You've got people on the left, you got people on the right.
Right.
Now there have been studies indicating a very specific, distinct personality, dispositional, temperamental difference between people on the left and people on the right.
Yeah.
And given your sort of vast experience in life and politics, describe from your opinion what that difference is.
The difference primarily comes down to we versus I. I think it's a communitarian view versus an individualistic view. Do I believe that everything I do is affected by and affects others? I do. And I want it to be that way. I want to be part of a community. It's one of the great things, for instance, about growing up and living in New York, where you live in an apartment building and you're all part of it, and you share the noises and the smells and all the ethnic cooking and all of that. That just gets me excited that we would all be in this together, as different as we are. I think the view on the right is much more, leave me to myself. I'm out in my wilderness doing my own thing. And it's admirable. We admire people who, get to the moon or, to the South Pole by themselves, or believe that they've gotten there by themselves. But I actually think that the communitarian view is the one that's going to win out in the end.
Understood. And we're going to have to wrap up shortly, but I do have given that you're a new organization, this is an opportunity for you to describe for people where they can find you on the web.
Absolutely.
How they can get in touch with you, how they can participate, and how they can be involved. So please do.
Fantastic. Well, our website is www.progressivemass.com. You can just sign up right there. As soon as you sign up, we get in touch with you. We would love to have you involved in our conference, which is Sunday, March 24th at LaSalle College in Newton, Massachusetts. We're going to do policy in the morning and organizing in the afternoon. In fact, we've got a lecture on dealing with power, so I think that'll be really fun for people. And we invite you to get involved in any way that sort of seems interesting to you on our website. There are lots of action opportunities on the website itself.
Understood. Well, Deborah, listen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ben.
And good luck with Progressive Massachusetts. This is Ben Schwartz, Emphasis Massachusetts, and thanks for watching.